Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is George Bruno, as you know. Go ahead, introduce yourself.
So I'm Aaron Walter, and I have to give a little bit of a shout out. I'm originally from Wisconsin, to all the people that maybe would be watching or perhaps are familiar with George's channel from Wisconsin. A great hello, but I'm not there right now. So but it's nice. It's nice to be talking with you.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, we're going to have an interesting conversation, and it's about something that, or some things that I don't usually talk about, but that doesn't mean it's not important.
Right.
And usually, one of the reasons why I don't talk about those things is because I really don't have any insight. Over 2 decades as a therapist, there was always two items that I avoided. I would
Mm,
go into work. I was a clinical director of a psychiatric clinic during the day, and then I worked 2 to 3 nights a week
mm,
in a outpatient clinic. And then there would be a stack of charts of people that had intake interviews uh, who were in line to get therapy. And
mm-hmm.
you would go through the charts and say, yes, I'll take this person. Or, you'd slide it off and say, no, I can't deal with that. Or uh, this might be better for this person or this therapist. And two of the things that I always pushed off to other therapists were eating disorders
Mm,
and sexual abuse issues because I felt like I just didn't have the insight and the skills needed to help a patient who had those issues. I can add another thing to that, and that would be porn addiction,
mm-hmm.
and is going to be one of the things that we'll touch on tonight.
Sure.
I have I have no insight into that. I never struggled with it. I don't under I've read about it. I ain't feeling it, as they say. And I defer to people who know something about it, have insight into it, its causes, why it has a grip on men, how to get away from it. And I pride myself years ago on being the referral king. I would refer cases out if I could not deal with them. So,
Mm,
one of the things that we're going to do tonight is we're going to talk about that. And I will not only defer to you, but I will refer to you as well for people who need resources to
sure.
deal with them. Yeah.
Sure.
So, is there such a thing as porn addiction?
The short answer is yes. Now, to expand that a little bit, most clinical scientists, when they look at the basic definition of compulsive disorders or compulsive behaviors, maybe 20, 30 years ago, they didn't include pornography in that basic definition. However, what multiple studies, and I'm not referring to studies taking place in the last 10 years, studies as recent as like 2 years ago, has shown that there is a compulsivity that allows, in particular, men to harm them mentally, to harm them physically, and then also to harm the relationships that they're in. And when it gets to the point that it is not controllable behavior, it's an addiction. And they have slowly come around to this view that yes, pornography can be viewed as an addiction. And then there would be other advocates, such as myself and others, that would say it's actually like it's a public health crisis. We have younger ages of boys, also girls, but in particular boys, that are exposed to pornography as early as, well, the average now is 11, but there have been indicators into like 8 years old could be the early age. So this is prepubescent, right? This is pre-puberty boys being exposed to not a nudity from a painting, right? Not a nudity that would come, through rather, and I'll put this in quotation marks, an innocent way or an innocent venue. This is hardcore pornography with no foundation, no basis as a reference. And of course, it's interesting. It's a bit taboo, right? We have to keep it secret, because we're not going to tell others, but we'll share with friends. It would be like when I was younger, or maybe even perhaps for you and your generation, it would be like finding, the magazines, right? You knew maybe where they were. There was a secrecy attached to it. There was an excitement attached to it. But now it's not those, right? We're talking about actually visual stimulation, digitalized visual stimulation, which is having a tremendous negative effect on not only the youth, but on it's a long-term problem. I mean, people who have been addicted for 20, 30, 40 years that are still struggling with this. There's also been an increase. So I mean, that's kind of, I would say, the short answer, or kind of a longer answer based on the short answer of yes. But it's fascinating, and yet also at the same time very sad. The percentage, the large amount of 20-year-olds that have porn-induced erectile dysfunction, negatively impacting their relationships. I mean, not just having, let's say, multiple sexual partners. No, I'm talking about there's no, or it's a challenge to have a long-term relationship with a partner. So there's a whole variety of not only mental or psychological and emotional, but also just health negatives to this. Yeah.
When I think of addiction in terms of like my first job out of graduate school I was director of drug and alcohol treatment.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was in college, I used to work at a drug and alcohol treatment center. And I used to work the 3 to 11 or the 11 to 7 shift. The 3 to 11 shift, and it was like a 125 bed hospital. There would be a program in the evening, and then there would be groups, and then most of the patients would go to bed. Those that couldn't go to bed would have impromptu sessions with me in my office. When I worked the 11 to 7 shift, again, those that couldn't sleep were encouraged to do a little talk therapy, and they spent some time with me, just chatting about whatever. Not a lot of therapy is happening at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, but it's just, what's on your mind? Tell me what's going on. Mm-hmm. And this was when there was everything from, back then they used to call them 28-day programs.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah. And some people would be there as long as 3 to 6 months. Some people would get in to the 28-day program.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, insurance, the reason why it was called a 28-day program, because it was 4 weeks. And that's what insurance would pay for, as if there was a magic period of time that you could, like magically on day 29, you no longer crave drugs or alcohol. But in my practice, I used to look for two things, and these are the two elements of addiction. That's tolerance and withdrawal. Tolerance means you need more every time to get the same high. Withdrawal means that something happens to you when you try to do without it. Those are the two elements that must exist for the pure definition of addiction.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to pornography, talk about tolerance and withdrawal.
Well, in terms of tolerance, the more that you are exposed and the longer period of time that you are exposed or exploring pornography, your tolerance actually it doesn't grow, it gets smaller. So you need more and more of the chemical release of dopamine. You need that to get that rush. So in a sense, it's very similar to alcohol, or actually more closer analogy would be to drugs, either cocaine or heroin, where you need a stronger hit every single time to get that rush, to get that satisfaction.
And is that more? Do you think that has to do with you need more of it, or a different type? Like I've heard some people say that the slippery slope of porn is that it gets weirder and weirder. Like initially, it's a video of a man and a woman having sex, or what leads up to having sex, and then it goes from just normal sex to more bizarre kind of stuff that might include pain, that might include domination, belittling, just what I would just call weirdness.
Yes, that is correct. There is a progression, and men who go into some form of addiction recovery therapy will point this out, where in the beginning the satisfaction could be found in, we'll say, kind of a regular or normal sexual scenes, but then later it increasingly became either more violent, or, you're correct, more weird in what was in what was shown. I won't use the word allowed or acceptable, but it was needed more and more of that for them to get either sexually aroused or actually to have orgasm. And it wasn't, it's one thing if you are alone, but if you are in a relationship, this is the negativity for the actual relationship. You can either bring in, and many times men they will introduce pornography as a way to, we use the terms like to spice up the love life, which it's a myth, and pornography does not spice it up at all. It actually just denigrates it and destroys it. But if it is introduced and if it is used, it actually will lead to some forms of violence or some forms of weirdness with the real partner. And there have also been men who will admit, and I'm speaking multiple studies, and even in my own speaking with men, they will say, well, I couldn't get aroused with the real life person. I needed some kind of simulation or stimulation to get it started, and that was pornography. And I couldn't finish, right? I couldn't actually have orgasm with a real life partner. I had to, in my mind, fantasize about a scene or multiple scenes to reach that completion. Because really what pornography is doing in terms of the tolerance is it is rewiring the neurochemicals in our brain, the brain pathways. It's rewiring it for, again, those more intense dopamine kind of hits or rushes. So you mentioned, that the 28-day, for 4 weeks in terms of recovery. Usually, men who will say, "Okay, I'm committed and I want to stop. I want to, get over my addiction." Usually, they will try, or it's recommended to try a 30-day, so one full month, a 30-day challenge of no pornography, no masturbation as well. And to follow, to see, well, first off, it's to see if they can do this, and they can follow certain strategies. By 90 days, and again, I should do a quick caveat and say that it really depends upon the length of time that this addiction has existed, and also the individual himself. But if not 30 days, usually then by 90 days, there is a significant process, because we've moved after the rebooting, as it's called, into the rewiring. So we are rewiring the neurochemicals, the brain pathways, again, back to normal, away from that negative kind of stimulus.
I have a scenario. I remember when I was in my 30s, I lived in a second floor condo. And on the first floor, I would have to walk past this one apartment, this one condo, where there was a couple. And they would leave their blinds open. And I had to walk past it to get to the back door and go up the stairs.
Sure.
And he'd be laying there on the bed. Now, keep in mind, I never was fascinated with porn or voyeurism or anything like that. I just don't have that propensity. Doesn't exist. I would walk by that window. He'd be laying on the bed, while her head was bobbing up and down on him,
Mm-hmm.
and there was porn on a television, playing on a television on a dresser, and their blinds were open.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, and I would walk by and just because I was working 3 to 11 at this time, second shift, and I'd walk by and literally just kind of put my hand up like this as I would go in the door. And I thought to myself, why does he need to watch this while his wife is doing that to him?
Mm-hmm.
And they were a married couple, and they left the blinds open, and it was very odd. It was just very odd. I lived there for probably 4 years. I think they were there for maybe the last year that I was there. And I found it very odd. Like when I would encounter them in the hallway as they were going to work in the morning, I'd be like, oh God, do they know that I saw that? They had to. I don't know. They can't be that stupid. But it would occur to me, why does he need that if his wife is giving him pleasure?
Sure. Well, I can't speak for them, but I could say that from my own research, my own experience, and also working with men, again, the pornography being on the television, that is that's purely for him in terms of maintaining either erection or arousal.
Yeah.
Having the blinds open, there's a level. We're talking about tolerance again now. To your kind of your first question there, there's a level of openness to risk, openness to discovery or being found out, being watched. You mentioned voyeurism. There is a certain increased interest in those types of behavior, those types of activity.
I guess on their part, it would be called exhibitionism, which
Absolutely.
years ago, I think that was actually a crime. And somebody would be labeled an exhibitionist. Now, we haven't heard that much, have we? I mean, that's something, that word goes way back, but I haven't heard that in decades.
Well, I know that it still exists, and there are if you're in those kinds of groups, there's specific maybe locations in which you can participate in that type of activity, that type of behavior. But I think most local ordinances, not only in the United States but also in the UK, in Europe, individual European countries, it is criminal. So there would be some form of a fine, or I can't speak in terms of exactly what it would be, but yeah, it would be considered to be criminal. But again, this is arousal and stimulation, and then a willingness or an openness, maybe not rationally afterwards, but leading up to it, that the more risk, then the higher kind of the arousal. That's where even now it's searchable in terms of the pornography sites, public sex, voyeurism, but in particular, like in public, it's people get off by doing that, and also people who are actually participating in sex, knowing that some people could be watching them, could be filming them. They get off on that as well.
Yeah. What about the withdrawal, the second element of addiction? What about withdrawal? How does that come into play with porn addiction?
So it usually follows a pattern. The first day or two after you've decided to take a break or to stop, usually there is shame. Now that has no religious connotation whatsoever. Okay, it's a shame to realize what you're doing, what gosh, how many hours did I spend just today? Or I've spent the last 2 days, and what did I get accomplished? What did I have to do? I forgot. Almost like a mental blindness. I forgot to do that. So there's a degree of shame, and then kind of anxiety that then is attached to that. Like, how's that going to impact my work, or how's that going to impact maybe the friendship, or how's that going to impact the relationship? Then there's a resolve, okay, but kind of white knuckling it, so to speak. Okay, I'm not going to do that anymore. Or I know there's a pattern. Most porn addicts we know ourselves. We know a pattern. How many days we can be sober. We know what our triggers are that can lead to relapse, or that generally do lead back to relapse. So for some, it's 2 or 3 or 4 days. For others, it could be up to a month. Maybe for some more. For others, it's less or more. Again, it's very individual. But the withdrawal in the very, very beginning is usually shame, followed by some form of anxiety, followed then by some kind of resolve. Okay, I'm not going to do it again, or I need to, somehow fix it, somehow solve it. And for many men, they're trying to find that, like the magic bullet, or the magic pill, which will just suddenly, make it stop. But really, it's behavioral changes that has to occur, and coupled with that behavioral change is the psychological rewiring, following that reboot of really what they're doing.
Is it? Do you think porn addiction? This just occurred to me. Does it exist in an environment where there is a lack of sex or someone having no sex? Because plenty of married men who have access to a wife,
yes,
and the bedroom are addicted to porn. So it's not so much like, it's not a sexually starving man's addiction. There could be men who could have sex whenever they want,
right,
but are still addicted to it.
Right.
Comment on that.
Yeah. So first off, if you think of, we're now living through a pandemic, but we are seeing at the moment a convergence, George, of actually 3 pandemics. The first, of course, is the coronavirus. The second really is pornography. And then the third is anxiety. And it crosses all ages, all races. It doesn't matter if you, and all income levels. You can be a highly successful, making, $1 million, and you still, again, in secret, be a porn addict. Or you can be a 12 or a 17 or 22-year-old kid who's also addicted to porn. But to address specifically your question, let's say, of people who are in a committed relationship, whether they are married or if they're just with a long-term partner, why would they be using pornography when the real life thing is in front of them, right? Well, I can say from my own experience, unfortunately, we're not looking. We don't think of it in terms of, oh, that person is available to me right now. Usually, there is some form of block to that kind of thinking, and it could be that the spouse or the partner is part of the trigger that leads to maybe anxiety, or it could just be the trigger that leads directly then to porn consumption. Now, why would that be the case? Again, most men, we don't show our emotions. We don't share our fears, our anxieties, our stress. We keep it inside unless we have some really good, authentic men, that we hang out with, that we can actually share this, with. But generally speaking, I would say that, and this is particularly true in the United States, where masculinity has been emasculated to the point that we don't know what to think or how to act around the opposite sex. So we get into relationships or we get into marriages, and now we're in a particular moment where leadership, strong male leadership, is actually required, and we're still acting like it's a sitcom on television, where we're accepting to be spoken to a certain way, and where we are deferring almost to our spouse or to our partner, and that is emasculation, and that leads to heightened levels of anxiety and stress. Finances, of course, play also a big role in that, And so pornography is a stress, it's like the stress valve. It's a stress releaser, oftentimes, you know. And I'm not talking about, okay, I'm going to go in front of my computer and be there for an hour. You know, it can be, I'm going to go into the toilet, I have my phone, and I'm going to jack off for 5 minutes to some photos that I've saved. Or I'm going to quickly go to the campsite that I'm familiar with, that, you know, that's been saved in my cookies, you know, and get my quick satisfaction there because I'm stressed and I'm anxious, or I'm angry because I've come back and something's been said. You know, something's been said to me, and I came back from work, and it was, you know, a bad day at work, or again, in this particular situation, there's all this kind of added pressure. So oftentimes, more often than not, I should say, unfortunately, pornography is the struggle, because it's still secretive. I mean, it's something that is talked about and laughed about, but not something that's talked about and taken serious enough.
Yeah.
So to have communication with your spouse, or to have communication with your partner, to say, you know what, this has been a part of my life. I don't know if I'm addicted, or perhaps to say, I know that I am addicted, and I'm struggling with this, and I know I'm going to hurt you, or maybe I already have hurt you, but I want to be honest with you. You know, honesty is so important, and that is what's actually missing in so many of the relationships, because authentic, you know, honesty, because it has provided that block. Yeah.
In the alcohol and drug addiction world, there's a couple different sides. One is once an addict, always an addict. You know, I'm an alcoholic. I'm just not drinking right now, but I will always be powerless over alcohol. And then there's those that are more like rational recovery, Albert Ellis types, that will say, you can beat this. I was an alcoholic. I used to abuse alcohol. I no longer do it. And then there's, in that camp, there's the guy that says, I can have a cocktail now, but I know when to stop. With porn addiction, would you say, are there parallels between the drug and alcohol addiction world? Once a porn addict, always a porn addict? Or can someone beat it and say, I used to be addicted to it, or it used to cause me problems? Like some people would say, like we used to talk about alcoholics versus problem drinkers.
Sure. I can
comment on that.
Of course. So the parallel is very, very accurate. There are, like I said, those who are in recovery 90 days or 90 days plus would fall probably into that first category. They would be identifying themselves, or they could, you know, be called, you know, I'm a recovering addict. So they're thinking of themselves still kind of in that way. Those that are maybe more than 2 years, 2+ years from actual pornography and masturbation use, they can say, you know, I'm a recovered porn addict. You know, it's not a part of my life anymore, or my lifestyle anymore, and I have zero interest in even entertaining the thought of looking, or entertaining the idea that I could relapse.
Yeah.
Because there are certain, again, there's a strategy or there's a habit that they've implemented which effectively kind of blocks or checks when some trigger would you know, resurface. So for that alcoholic, just to use that as the, you know, example or the analogy, they're at a nice restaurant and they're with their friends, and perhaps their bit of poison was not beer, but let's say a really nice Scotch whiskey, right? If they smell it, right, it's going to bring back the memories. It might even be a bit of a trigger, but they're not actually going to then fall off that wagon, so to speak, and start ordering, you know, scotches and whiskeys. So much of our culture in the United States, it's actually around the world, but so much of the media culture has been sexualized, almost to the point of it being pornified. I mean, so many movies, right? So many TV serials, especially now that we have all the streaming sites that people are using. It's quite common to have not just a little nudity, but a lot of nudity in shows, a lot of sex scenes in shows. So, if I come across a show, for example, there's one I really like watching that's called Outlander, and it's on Starz. Well, there's often, unfortunately, but it's in the books, and they're trying to adhere to how it is in the books. But there's often intimate scenes there. Well, if I'm watching this, it's like that nice smell of that scotch. It brings back some memories, and
Yeah.
it can potentially be the trigger to go online and actually search for that actress's name, or to search for that specific episode in that scene. But I've myself put in place, and others as well. You put in place a certain strategy or a certain kind of habit, that a positive habit, which behavioral wise checks that trigger, or checks that kind of emotion. Okay, to go there. So to kind of circle back, there are then those 2+ years out that would say, I am not an addict anymore. This is not a problem for me anymore. But it's a long road of recovery. I mean, to get in that 90 days, or to get 5 years, or to get 10 years.
Yeah.
It's hard effort. It is possible. I know people that are 10 years. I know people that are 5 years. Myself, it's 3 years. So it is possible. It is challenging. It's difficult, but it's definitely possible. But it really begins. That recovery process, it begins really with the mind, with a positive mindset. There's so many myths and so many lies that we have voluntarily agreed to, and we have to change those things first. And that's a very individual approach.
I've had some correspondence with Dr. Karen Kellick, and she is of the persuasion that porn is cheating. She takes it to a different level. It's not just an illness, but it's cheating. So she adds a little something else to it if the couple, if the man is married.
Right.
How would you deal with that? Is porn cheating?
Well, I would say it is, because and again, I'm not addressing it from a religious standpoint at all. So within Judeo-Christianity, I'm not going to talk about any of that.
Yeah.
But just within the dynamics of a relationship, especially a committed relationship. Clinical psychologists, therapists, when they do couple counseling, if pornography is part of that, they have reported consistently. The most recent study was in 2017, so just 3 years ago, that the wives, the women, feel cheated upon. They feel that their self-image, their body image, is completely destroyed. For the men themselves, right? They will be looking at, for more sexual gratification, they're looking at other women, or they're looking at other, maybe if it's a homosexual couple, maybe they're looking at other men, but they are objectifying digitalized pictures, right? So it is cheating again, especially you've got a real life person in front of you or beside you, and you're not seeking out any actual gratification there, right? Instead, trying to get a quick fix, because really that's really what it comes down to. You're getting your quick fixes, and I use again a kind of a drug analogy, that dopamine rush to be satisfied. But it is cheating, and after that pornography use is over with, and you get the shame, and then you get the anxiety, and you get the rationalizations that come forth, and you get the I'm going to stop, I'm going to be better. Part of that shame and part of that kind of resolve is that element of, I'm not treating that person, I'm not treating my partner, I'm not treating my spouse with respect or with dignity. I am cheating on them with this digitalized pixels, with the pixels in front of me. So I would agree with her.
Well, I've heard people refer to women as being golf widows
Mm.
at time. He spends more time out in the golf course than he does with me, and whatever the man's hobby is, she's a woodworking widow, a golf widow, that kind of thing. And that hobby becomes kind of like the surrogate spouse,
Mm-hmm.
so to speak. And, it's a reward to the wife at times. Honey, this weekend I'm not playing golf, and we're going out and we're going to have dinner, and it's going to be just you and me,
Mm-hmm.
and he tries, he tries to make up for it. Now, I've heard of men and women both in relationships where they use pornography, they both use it to jumpstart their sexual relations.
Mm-hmm.
Because normally, like when you think of porn, when I think of porn and porn addiction, I instantly think men. I instantly think the single guy or the unhappily married guy. What about the couple that uses porn to enhance their relationship, or is it just a man thing, or is it a woman thing, or does it affect both?
Well, increasingly, again, studies have shown, again, studies just as recent as 3-4 years old, that the percentage of women who are addicted to pornography, that has increased from just a decade ago, about 17%. So now it's 30. Now it's roughly about 10%. Just for women, women who can say, I'm addicted to porn. I'm looking at porn. Now, in terms of actual relationship, having pornography in the relationship, and it is, I mean, it's become essentially a third part of the relationship, a third member of the relationship.
Yeah.
I would argue rather forcefully that it doesn't actually enhance the sex life at all.
Yeah.
It doesn't bring any joy, any actual stimulation. Both partners have conditioned themselves for arousal based on what they're viewing. Again, the pixels in front of them rather than each other in front of them. And just as much as it's really kind of messing up the mind, and for both of them, it's also messing up their bodies. Increasingly, there is the porn-induced erectile dysfunction for men. They literally cannot last long.
It's almost paradoxical, because when you first said that, I thought, wait a minute, it's doing the opposite of what it's originally intended to do.
Mm-hmm. Yes, but there are men, and unfortunately, the biggest percentage of erectile dysfunction clients, or at least those that are going to doctors and having to be prescribed medication for erectile dysfunction. I mean, they've added it, porn-induced erectile dysfunction, because they don't fit. They're 22-year-olds. They're 25-year-olds.
25-year-olds with dysfunction.
Yeah. And so that, when the doctor is checking off that checklist of, well, okay, he's not of that certain age. He's in relatively good health, right? He's not obese. He doesn't have, they're taking everything off. So then they ask, okay, well, from a psychologically or from a behavioral perspective, okay, well, let's ask about porn. Like, did you watch porn? Yeah, I do. Okay, well, how often? Oh, a few times a day, or a few times, a day, not a week. Day.
Yeah.
So it's conditioned. Their arousal is conditioned on what they're watching, what's visual.
Right.
So with the actual partner in front of them, they're going flabby, right? They've lost the arousal. They've lost their stamina. There is no stamina, right? They can't last longer than just a few minutes. So of course that leads to, in let's say a couple counseling, there is dissatisfaction in their sex life. That's just one of the big things for the men. For the women, there is an increased thinking that they're not they're not beautiful enough or pretty enough or worthy enough, for the attention, the actual physical attention. So they will start dieting, right? and that could lead then to other type of conditions, some
Yeah.
form of food disorder, or they will search out for some kind of cosmetic change, whether that be actual cosmetic surgery or something different, because they are trying to compare themselves then to a highly sanitized fantasy of what they are exposing themselves to. And that's really what I mean. We want to be honest here. This is what pornography is. It is a highly sanitized fantasy of sex. Sex is beautiful. The intimacy is wonderful, but it's also messy and takes time, right? if you're going to be doing it right, and also if you want to actually fully experience it, it's going to be more. It should be more than just 1 minute or 2 minutes, right? And should be more than people who are cosmetically altered or
Yeah.
whatnot.
Yeah.
So for both partners, it's negative. There are just so many negatives, and I've just mentioned a couple of them. So it's not. There is no spice that's been brought. There is no actual stimulation or enhancing the actual experience. It is negative for both of them, for both couples, mentally, as psychologically, as well as physically.
All right. So we talked about the problem. I like to view things in terms of problem, solution, and outcome.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the solution. I'm sure there's not a one size fits all solution. Let's just talk about some of the ways that people have successfully overcome this addiction.
So in my work, it's very individualized because there are some strategies and some habits that are common or similar. But you're right, George. There is no kind of one size fits all. Some people decide to participate in some form of a 12-step program. Maybe joining Sexaholics Anonymous, or Sexaholic Addict Anonymous, SA or SAA. Others will be seeking or searching out groups. We're all kind of doing this now, right? Or trying to learn things or be connected to groups through social media or through Facebook that are of our interest. So I think there is a genuine interest by people to find groups that of other people who are addicted to porn, or at least think that they are addicted to porn. And then once they're in the group, they start asking questions, such as like, can I be cured of this, right? Or will I ever get over this? Or well, what are some of the patterns? How long has your sobriety been? How many days? How many weeks? How many months? What are some of your triggers? Oh, really? Your trigger was tiredness. When you get really tired, oh, that's when to go to bed sooner. You masturbate, or you watch something real quick. You go on a cam, or you do something. Oh, I do that too. Or I'm super stressed, or my partner or my wife said something, and that was a trigger for me. So in a convoluted way, I'm going to get back at her, right? How? By hurting her. How? Well, by looking at porn. Well, okay, again, it's convoluted, but there's a weird, twisted kind of rationalization that comes to that. But searching out these groups, being interested, finding other people, and that's the biggest thing, I think, with pornography. It is taboo. We talk about it. It's in the sitcoms that we watch. It's in maybe scripts of movies that we see, but it's in that context it's laughable, right? It's part of the laugh track. Just like 20 years ago or 30 years ago, it suddenly was okay to discuss, but again, in a laughing way, the alcoholic, right? Or, the family member that was an alcoholic, but not actually addressing it seriously, right? So it's mentioned, it's joked about, right? There's humor, but it's actually serious instead.
Yeah.
So to kind of pull it out of the darkness, take it out of the closet, so to speak, and say, you know what? Yes, I also have this addiction, and oh wow, you do too, or you did as well. Can you help me? What did you do? This fraternity or this brotherhood of addicts, of others who are saying, I understand how you're feeling. I understand exactly what happened to you, because that happened to me a week ago, or that used to happen a few years ago. That's very, very helpful. And I'm hopeful that as much as, again, we've got this second pandemic that we're experiencing. We're all being isolated. We're all inside, right? So the increase in potential, and well, it's already happening. I won't even use the word potential anymore, right? Of pornography use will change to, okay, there's going to be increase in those actually searching out some form of pornography recovery, because they realize, yeah, this is a problem, and I have to stop it, or I have to get a better control, over it. So it's individualized though, George, because it's not to say, and my approach has always been, look, if you've been sober for 20 days and you relapse, and I use those terminology, sober and relapse, and you relapse on day 20, it doesn't mean that you go backwards and you start over again on day 1. Actually, no, that's the next day is day 21. But what did you learn? Like, okay, you've gone 20 days, so what were you doing? And what can we use then, if they're working with me? So it's like, okay, so what have you learned that we can then apply for the next 21 days? Right?
Yeah.
And kind of it's incremental in that way. But there's a common acronym actually that I use. It's called HALT. So the H stands for hunger. And I'm not the one that came up with this. This is actually pretty common throughout the recovery literature that's out there. But H is the hunger, A is anger, L is loneliness, and then T is tiredness. And for some people, it's all of those are the triggers.
Yeah.
For others, maybe it's only one, or for others, maybe only two. For me, it never was an issue with hunger or being tired. For me, it always was anger and loneliness. So those things were problems for me, were challenges that I had to overcome. And for many, I would say for the majority of men, it's usually some form of anxiety, some form of anger and some form of loneliness. And then loneliness kind of leads up to like maybe an anxiety. And we're in a perfect kind of petri dish of all of those now, since we're all in quarantine. But it's an individualized approach where there are lots of similarities, some commonalities for the recovery. But for others, it would be shorter, and it is shorter in terms of the time that it takes. And then for others, it's longer. Unfortunately, it is linked with the length of their addiction. If they've been addicted for longer than 15, 20 years, it's going to be that two plus year process before they can say, you know what, yeah, I am no longer addicted to this. For those
here's my last comment, and this would be, you can try to get an alcoholic to stop. You can pour their alcohol down the drain. You can manipulate their social circumstances. Don't take them to places that have bars. Go to restaurants that are just BYOBs, so they don't even have a bar. Don't go to places, the whole people, places, and things. But a lot of people will say the alcoholic will not stop until they are ready or until they reached their bottom. Absolutely. You can't tell somebody that they're a porn addict. It's the same thing. You have to, they have to reach their bottom. There has to be a crisis.
Oh yeah, absolutely. They have to have that. The pain point has to be real. It has to be acute for them to actually search or reach out for help. You can say I'm an alcoholic, but I can handle it, right? I'm a functionally alcoholic, or I'm an occasional drug user, but I don't let it control me. So there are people out there that will say, yeah, I watch porn, I use porn. Or I've actually never encountered somebody who just says I masturbate. It's always the two, and this is increasing. This has increasingly been what I've read and also discovered in myself. They're always combined. So it's never, I've got a problem with masturbation. No, I'm usually watching porn and then I'm masturbating. Okay. So it's linked. But yeah, you have to get to that pain point, and that could be physical. You are no longer functioning. You are no longer getting aroused. Your arousal is lasting less and less, Or it could be you've been caught. You have been caught like red hand in the cookie jar by your spouse, or you've been caught at work. Again, talking about that level of risk. And you either are facing termination or you've been suspended pending some form of review. You got it. That's kind of like the wake-up call. Now, for like I said, so for some, it's I can handle it. All right, they can handle it until they get to that point though of awakening, of realizing no, this is a problem and I need to change. And then there are those who are already there and are actively now trying to find that strategy of how to do that. So like I said, there are groups that are available for them to join. For the men that I work with, and that I have worked with in the past, I usually start them off really with three things. The first is some form of software, blocking software on their devices, and it's all their devices. It's not just their computer, their laptop computer, because generally people now just have laptops, not actual desktops. But most actual consumption is done on the hands-free. It's on the tablets. It's on the actual mobile phones. So installing some screen accountability software. Covenant Eyes is the name of one. Accountability to me, that's another. And so that's the first thing, some type of screen blocking software. The second is actual accountability. They need to find an accountability partner. So if they would choose to be working with me, I have the men that I work with. It's a daily check-in. So again, it's very similar to Alcoholics or Substance Abuse Anonymous. You have an accountability. You have a partner who usually has been or either through the program or they are recovered, right? So they can hold you accountable. If you don't have those two things and you think you can just kind of through willpower or white knuckle it out, no, you fail. you immediately will relapse. And there are some that and I've worked with a few of them that say, well, I thought I could, but no, or it's they get the screen accountability, but then they find a way around it, right? Surprise, surprise. They buy a new phone, and then of course they don't install it. So but they don't have the accountability. That's the second thing, right? So the accountability is there because there are people that have already done the same thing. So they'll say, look, of course you did this, or don't even think of being tempted to do this because you will be. Trust me. Don't tell me no, you will be. Or, you're going to try to do this, or you're going to think about doing this. Maybe not now, but in, day, whatever. That 30-day reboot challenge that I mentioned earlier, it's usually around day 7 to 14 that the person relapses, unless they have some form of positive habit or strategy which they've already kind of been consistent in or committed to, and the accountability partner of course helps them specifically during those days, so that won't happen. And the third thing that I would always recommend is a journal, and it's a wonderful activity just to do regardless of whether you have addiction or not. But it's so vital for the recovery process, because what you're doing is actually first off, you're slowing down your brain, right? You're slowing down your mind. You're actually kind of lowering your blood pressure. You're slowing down life itself, and you're actually taking time to write. I know that you're a fan of journaling and writing. It was a big challenge for me, but I like it now, precisely because I am deliberately slowing down my day. And I usually do it in the morning and also in the evening. So it's a great way to start the day, and it's also a nice way to end the day. But you're journaling your feelings. Okay, if it is a trigger, if something happened which is triggering, why is that? And the more that you're journaling, the more that you're writing those things out, then you on yourself, it's self-awareness. You're recognizing then that there's a pattern. Sure enough, it was maybe it wasn't day 7, but it was day 10 that I wanted to. And there was no actual trigger. It just was the urge to self-sabotage myself, right? Or I thought out of those 4, the acronym, I didn't think that hunger was a trigger. But now that I'm looking back what I was writing, the last time I relapsed, or the last 2 times I relapsed, actually happened to be on a day that I didn't eat, my lunch, or I didn't really have a good dinner, or, so it's a way for that self-awareness, that self-realization of how the recovery is going. So that's usually the third thing that I have my clients with, or just people that have kind of generally are talking to me even before we would enter into some form of partnership that I suggest that they do.
I could see where this conversation can easily go another 2 hours. This could be a full day seminar. This could be a weekend retreat. There's no doubt in my mind that it is a rabbit hole that we can just go deep and wide into the topic. Men, women, couples, Christian people, non-Christian people, young, old. I mean, there's just so many variables, and there's no way we're going to cover it tonight. So I think you are an important voice. Your work is important. I'm clueless in working with people who have this issue. If people want to know more, if they want to work with you, how can they find you?
So they can find me through Instagram at New Men Rising.
New Men Rising.
Correct. They can also go to my website, AaronWalterCoaching.com, and they can book a 30. It's free. That's what I offer. It's going to be free, 30-minute kind of a clarity call. We talk. We do kind of discover, do you have that addiction? Are you at that pain point to actually start a recovery process? And I'm actually very passionate about this, George. I for divorces, unfortunately, it takes two. It takes two to get married, and it takes two also to get divorced. And there are a variety of different factors that lead to actual divorces. One of the factors, and it is a shame to me, but one of the factors that I brought to the destruction of my marriage was pornography. And if a man is married, or if they're in a serious relationship and pornography is part of it, I want to help them kick it out of the relationship so it doesn't destroy it like it did mine.
Yeah.
And also, I have radically transformed my life. I see the health benefits. I see the spiritual benefits. I see the physical benefits. Just in this 3 years of recovery. I want to do the same thing for anybody who's willing to work. Anybody who's willing to work with me, I'm passionate about helping them radically transform their life too. There's habits, positive habits that they can implement starting day one.
Yeah.
There's strategies. There's a one-to-one coaching, one-to-one mentoring that I do together with them to transform their life, and that's what I want. That's what's passionate to me. That's what I want to do for them. And so AaronWalterCoaching.com, or they can find me on Instagram. Also, we connected through Twitter, so I'm also on Twitter as well. Same handle, New Men Rising, or they can find me Aaron Walter. That's AaronWalter. And I would love to talk to you. Yeah, you're right. It could be another 2 hours. One of the things that I am planning to do, probably in the next 3 months, is I'm going to be doing several one-day virtual workshops. Specifically on pornography addiction and strategies to overcome that. And then also another workshop is planned that will deal specifically for married men who are in either marriage or are in a committed relationship and are addicted to porn. Because again, we're all in quarantine. It's the pandemic of porn that is increased. It's hooking more and more people. Because also they're going to do, and those that are already hooked, they're going deeper and deeper and deeper into this addiction, and I really want to stop them going deeper, because the way out would just be a lot harder and more longer and not necessary.
Well, I look at you as a tool in my toolbox. You're a resource. There's people that write me quite often, and I honestly, I don't know where to point them to. And I'm glad we had this conversation because now I have someone to point them to. And like I said, I think you're an important voice in this world. There are men who are going to be watching this. There are women who are going to be watching this and feel like, wow, thank God there's someone who understands this. And
Yeah.
I'm glad that I can introduce you to them and them to you. So thank you
Yes.
for your time tonight.
Thank
And
you.
would you be open for a part 2 sometime?
Absolutely, I would be open. You know, our initial kind of dialogue on Twitter was in response to a message that you had tweeted, and I had responded in that, and it was about if you have a long distance relationship, how are you making that do? And I am in a long distance relationship. I'm engaged to be married later this year. So to a beautiful woman. I'm so happy, but yet I'm also so sad at the moment because I am separated from her.
Yeah.
When before we started recording, you mentioned that you're a father. I also am a father. I'm actually separated from my kids at the moment where I am. I can't travel to see them. Um, I can't travel to see my fiance, and there actually is no kind of end date to this, right? So
Yeah.
I would, though, absolutely love a part 2 to talk specifically about relationships and to kind of go maybe a little bit deeper into, all right, as an addict, should you share with your spouse or with your new significant other that this was an addiction or is an addiction? The answer is yes, you should. But some strategies and some advice in terms of how to approach that conversation.
Yeah.
It was the scariest, but yet most courageous thing that I did in this new relationship. And it has actually led to a deeper level of authenticity and love than I could have, ever actually kind of thought of or even prayed for. So it's quite beautiful. And yeah, part 2 would be great to talk about that or anything else that would be on your agenda, George.
And also, would you be open to being a guest on other people's podcasts and shows as well? Because there are many content creators that follow me as well. And we can really multiply your efforts by getting you in front of as many people as possible.
That would be wonderful. And I thank you for that offer, and I gladly accept it. Yes, very much so. I would be open to that.
Excellent. Aaron Walter, it's been fantastic having you. I feel a sense of relief because now I have somebody to refer people to, someone who has understanding and wisdom on this topic, which I really don't have. Like I said, I'm the referral king. You can have them. I don't even want to pretend that I know how to deal with something like this. And you are a godsend to a lot of people. You really are. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, George, for having me. It's been a pleasure talking.